Well, I'm excited. I'm Cody Horton, Managing Director for Diverse Recruiting Experts. I'm thrilled to have my guest, Tonie Leatherberry, with us. Tonie's got an amazing background. She's been a leader in professional services. She's been the president of the Deloitte Foundation, and she's on a number of boards. Tonie, I know that you're probably the busiest person in America, and I'm honored that you would be able to take the time to just share a little bit with our guests. Before we get started, I'd love to just have you tell us a little bit about your background and, what do you think has made you successful?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks, Cody, and to the audience. I'm so delighted to be with you today. I want you to know that when Cody Horton calls, you have to answer. And so when he called me and said, I would love to have you spend some time with us, I was so delighted. I love having sessions like this where I can engage and just share thoughts and perspectives and my own personal learnings from, having failures, having successes, and just living life. So it's really important for us to continue to engage that way, share our ideas and thoughts, share our concerns. I think we all learn from one another and we build off of one another's successes when we do that. So, what have I been doing? Well, I had a wonderful, wonderful career spanning 36 years. Started off as a mechanical engineer. I got my degree from Boston University, and I am proud that I'm now on the board of trustees of Boston University. So I could have never imagined that or saw that coming. It has afforded me, the foundation educationally for my life, and really proud to serve in that capacity. So I spent a good 8 years as a mechanical engineer doing really cool technology. I don't know that I could even do it right now at this time. If I had to think about multivariate calculus, I think I would cry. But I designed robotic workstations, created clean room conveyor system design technology, smart cart conveyor systems for manufacturing. And so I really got to do some cool tech. And I was with Digital Equipment Corporation, Cody, you may remember that. And I
Yes.
call that the Google of its time.
Yes.
I left there after moving up within digital, doing capital allocation for manufacturing sites all over the world, and then ultimately came to Deloitte to be a part of our manufacturing practice. And so I've had, amazing almost 30-year career at Deloitte where I served our clients from chemical clients to retail to other types of discrete manufacturing, but always at this intersection of technology that derives business and performance value.
Wow.
So that's what I've gotten to do. Some amazing, amazing projects, whether it was in France, whether it was in Japan, whether it was in Texas, it was always something that was different, and I had a learning experience. So, when I think about 30 plus years ago, I could never have envisioned what life would be and how it's played out. I retired September 19th, and I
Wow.
was just sharing with Cody earlier, of course, I didn't retire, I rewired, right? And so in 3 short months, I've gone from this wonderful career traveling all over the place to serving on 2 corporate boards, serving on Boston University's board. As I mentioned, I was already on Widener University's board, and now I'm a doc student at Widener University. So,
Impressive.
in addition to, I just stepped down as the chair of the Executive Leadership Council. My term ended December 18th. So, I've rewired. But having said that, I've been truly blessed with achievement, a loving family, recognition from others, and just the ability to grow physically, spiritually, emotionally, and professionally. And that's what's core to what's important to me. And so I'll pause there and see what questions you have.
Yeah. Tonie, I'll tell you what, and we want to make sure the audience knows if you can put your questions in the chat box, we certainly are going to make some time available for questions. as well. And, one of the things, Tony, that I'm really thrilled you're going to talk about is really that middle management space, right? How do you develop middle management in an inclusive way? Because so many middle managers are there that never get to that senior leadership. And you've certainly grown your career from the start to the highest levels of leadership. So I'm really thrilled to hear the things that you're going to be sharing with us. I got a couple of text messages before we got started with some leaders that actually wanted to join, but they'll get a chance to get the replay.
Right, sure. So let me just start with, I don't think leadership is defined by a title. Leadership to me is a set of values, and my personal leadership values are based on my personal values, and they're at the core of who I am. And I think they were formed in my early years from my parents. And so, I will start with that. I think you have to just have a leadership mindset. You need to start with that first. And so what do I mean by a leadership mindset? I think a lot of times people will talk about control. I have to control this, or I have to, tell my group what to do. And I would say a leadership mindset is shifting from a span of control to a span of influence. So that's kind of the first paradigm I would share with you. I would say the other one is shifting from being an administrator to being an advisor. So when you think about your boss, or your boss's boss, the next 2 or 3 levels up, how are you advising them? Because they need your insight, they need your input. And so don't just think about it as I'm an employee and I'm administrating my job, but how are you valued as an advisor? Who is coming to seek out your opinion and why? And then the third one I would think about, particularly for those who might be in human resources that are on this Zoom conference today, is shifting from what is discretionary to what is necessary. So shifting the mindset in terms of, particularly when it comes to investing in talent, what's necessary to invest in that talent as an asset, not just discretionary programs and things that we're doing to make us feel good, but how are we truly investing in those to make them reach their highest potential? So if we kind of agree to that, what I would say is, if we come back to what is leadership, in my opinion, I've been a student of servant leadership. So I think about it in terms of, how do you really invest in others to reach their highest potential? And as I said, this doesn't have to be title. In my days when I was a mid-level manager within Deloitte, I invested in our younger practitioners. I helped them to be best. I wanted to focus on how they could actually be promoted and help them think about how they improve their skills, both their technical skills as well as their soft skills. So it's really about your investment in others, your ability to create a vision of success for your whole group, your whole team. What are those examples? How are you encouraging and motivating? How are you engaging them? How are you giving them the right kind of feedback that they need to hear to perform? And so I'll stop there, and Cody, hopefully we're on the right track with the question.
I think this is amazing, Tony, and it's really helpful. In fact, that whole level setting with what leadership is and what it's necessary, what it's not. I think that's so critical, because a lot of times people think they do need that title. One of the things you and I had chatted about a little bit is just in that middle manager core, right? That's a place where those titles kind of can get into someone's headspace. What are some of the things that you think about that are certainly some challenges for the middle managers, but I also know that you've got solutions that help develop that middle management group and that middle group of leaders. What are some of the solutions that you think are critical in that process?
Well, and if we start with some of those attributes that I mentioned before, like being an advisor, let's take that one.
Sure.
I don't want my staff or whoever works with me to ever feel like they can't come and share their opinion with me, even if it's something I might not want to hear. So you have to think about, how do you effectively communicate, and who needs to be communicated with? And most importantly, how do they receive information? Because if you're coming to them and just dumping the problem in their lap, that's not showing up as a leader. But if you're coming to them that says, here's a concern that we need to understand and we may need to think about, and here are my thoughts of how we can address it, boy, am I going to be engaged with you. And so the first one is, are you serving as that advisor? And those are the tips and tricks of how to serve as an advisor. Are you someone who thinks you have to do it on your own? How are you engaging your team to be a part of what you're doing? So that comes back to that attribute I talked about in terms of span of control and shifting to span of influence. So as you move up and you have more and more responsibilities, what you're going to also recognize is that your responsibilities will require broader reach, broader engagement, broader socialization of what you're trying to get done. And you can't do it all. Those people that do it all or try to do it all is where we see sometimes the biggest failures, right? Or failings. And so as you think about it, always ask yourself, who's in this ecosystem? You know, in terms of the people that I have to convince, the people that I'm serving, the people that I have to leverage as resources to get this thing done. And so when you build that view and you think about the whole ecosystem, then you're better prepared for how you, again, shift from the span of control to the span of influence. The other one that I would still say is, still be solid in your technical craft, right? You know, because sometimes people will then, I'm a manager now, and they start shifting into all of the socialization stuff, but they're not staying astute and on top of what they need to know technically. So still be a student of your technical craft. And technical doesn't mean IT. It means whatever it is, whether it's HR, whether it's finance, whether it's legal, but be that student, stay apprised, stay on top of it from a technical craft standpoint, and encourage your team to share and learn with one another.
You know, Tonie, that is a great point. Just being that lifelong learner, I think is so critical. I mean, we see it all the time in the recruiting world. When you learn how to run recruiting, you forget that, oh, I need to keep learning about this space. I mean, you're a perfect example of that lifelong learner, right? I mean, you're embarking on additional education, which is far beyond anything that anybody is required to go do.
Some days I wonder why I did this to myself, but yeah, I do appreciate lifelong learning.
that is amazing. You know, there's a lot that the individual can do, and I know we're going to cover a little bit more of that, but what about from the senior leadership level, right? Where the senior leaders, you know, what's the role of that senior leader in developing those middle managers?
I don't think it changes. I don't think the components of it change. I think maybe the context or maybe the content changes. So it's more of the same, in my opinion. And so from a senior leader standpoint, again, that senior leader needs to get out of his or her own way to truly be that servant leader to their talent, to give them those opportunities, to take risk. I would say that's probably the number one thing that holds people back, is we don't take risk early on and often enough and give the person the proper resources and air cover so that they can be successful. So we're going to send Cody to Japan to be the manager of X. Where's the risk in that? And instead of not deciding not to send Cody because it's risky, let's send Cody, but make sure that we have a risk mitigation plan in place, right? We don't develop leaders if we're not willing to take those calculated bets.
Yeah.
And give them the opportunity. Because then what happens is, if we didn't give Cody the opportunity, 5 years from now, it's a foregone conclusion that he's not ready.
Right.
In all likelihood. So I would say a lot of it is still leading by example, having your own suite of advisors as a senior leader, you know, encouraging and motivating, kicking in the butt when you need to. That's okay. You do it in a loving way.
That's
right.
right. That's right.
And it's really based on trust. You know, I didn't talk about trust earlier, but even at the mid-level managers level, it's based on trust. If I trust someone and I feel they have my best interests at heart, I'm more than likely willing to accept any critical feedback that they're going to give me. Yeah. But if I haven't built a trusting foundation, I am not going to have a team that wants to follow me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So when you're trying to figure out, like, how do leaders recognize that, hey, here's some middle managers that we think have the things that we believe they need to scale if given the opportunity? Is there some thinking that goes into that with the senior leaders as they're identifying who those really middle managers are who could scale to the next level?
Well, with the senior leader, I think the senior leader should always be looking for, quite candidly, who they can advance beyond where they were. And that's a hard thing to do because, you know, we all have egos, and you know, it's one of those where you have to really say, for the future of the organization, or for the future of these individuals that I see they have a lot of talent and potential, how can I help them advance further than maybe even I did? And I certainly did that at Deloitte, where when I left, I saw, you know, people that I had groomed. They were now on the board of directors. They were doing other things that they would say to me, never forget the difference I've made. And in fact, that little plaque is right there in my office here, where they've given that to me because I pushed them, you know, I pushed them. And, you know, maybe I cracked the glass and maybe they now have broken it to go through. Someone's asking a question about what is the most important thing a middle manager could do on the path to becoming a senior leader. And I did, I think, touch on that earlier, but I will reinforce it. I think you have to be that advisor to the current senior leaders. You've got to be the person that when they're facing a difficult task, you're the first person they want to call. You have to come in with solutions. You have to engage with them. And, you know, making sure that you understand your relevance. I guess that's the best way to put it. What is your relevance in the overall ecosystem, as we talked about before? What are the priorities and the mission of the organization? How does what you do every day fit into those priorities and the mission? And can you articulate that when you have the moment? Because we will all have a moment, and it might be just one shot at it. And when you can articulate that relevance, that's your moment. And so I would say, always ask your question, how am I relevant? Do I know the priorities? Do I know how we're measuring success? Do I know the players? Do I understand the political undercurrent that's going on? Yeah. Do I understand our industry more broadly, right? Your relevance is, I think, one of the most important things on the path to becoming a senior leader.
Yeah, that's great. You know, one of the other things that you think about is the company's strategic, right? Where's the strategy going?
Right.
What should leaders do to really kind of connect those long-term strategic goals with some of those short-term goals as people grow as middle managers?
This is a great question. And so sometimes those come in conflict with one another, Cody, the short term versus the long term of where we're headed. I think you have to keep both of them in front of you. So what are those things that I can do over a 3-month, 6-month horizon? What are those things that fit in terms of the short term? Where I often see this most is, believe it or not, investments we're going to make in HR initiatives, whether it's diversity, whether it's something else, and it's in conflict because maybe short-term performance is a little soft right now. And so are we going to spend that extra money on something? And that's what I meant by discretionary versus necessary earlier. So the most important thing is to keep those short-term objectives and long-term objectives. You got to look at both. You can't just focus on one versus the other. And I think, again, to your senior leaders, I would articulate it both from both dimensions is we might make these short-term decisions that could impact us in the longer term. Which ones do we want to kind of compromise so that everybody's on the same page?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. You touched on D&I, and we'd be remiss not to address this in the conversation. If, when looking through that lens of diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, what are the challenges for growing more women, people of color, other demographics that cause you to have that diverse workforce, from growing them from that middle management space into developing as that senior leader, given all the complexities that might exist.
Right. Yeah, it's tough because I don't think there's a one size fits all answer to that. I think the things that have to be considered is what's the mission of the organization? What does it stand for? Who are they? You got to be real about that, because if you're not, a lot of people get hurt as a result of it, hurt feelings, whatever, as a result of it. So you have to really look yourselves in the eye and ask, are we being true to ourselves? There's a lot of pressure that I think is going to come along. It's only going to grow more and more. And that's because of ESG. And that's because of everything that we've been witnessing. So you're going to see diversity more, and I'm using diversity in a universal sense, inclusion, equity, belonging, in more and more CEO scorecards overtly. The board's asking for it. More and more played up in employee engagement surveys, more and more played up in terms of action. The one thing that, and particularly for each of the group individuals that are on this call that belong to groups that that serve in maybe a human resource capacity or a D&I capacity is, does your team look like and represent the people that you serve? Very simple question. Because just to be blunt, there's a lot of interest in recruiting people right now, and you and I've heard it. I can't find anybody, right? There are people out there, you can find them. So where are you putting your investments? How are you connecting to that community? How are you looking at it through that community set of lenses, not just your own? Do you have representation and belonging that represents where you want to head as an organization?
No, that's a great point. And Tonie, I know that, when we worked together years ago, you were a big champion, a big leader, an enabler of trying to attract, more diverse talent and being inclusive. So you've certainly got a track record of that. As you think about attracting, developing, retaining that middle manager population, what do you see as the areas that there should be the most emphasis put on, if any, when it comes to the growth trajectory for those middle managers?
Well, I think the key with many middle managers, first of all, again, not one size fits all, but what is your overall strategic view of talent and the role talent plays in your organization going forward? It's got to be a strategic conversation. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say something, maybe it's not too radical, but it might be radical. And that is, I think we're too hung up on retention. Retention is a lagging indicator. And I don't mean hung up on retention. I mean hung up on measuring retention. Let me be clear. It's a lagging indicator. We won't have a retention problem if we give people opportunities, if we're honest with them about their growth, and if we're supporting them in their own development. Guess what?
Yeah.
I think it's a lagging indicator.
That's a great call out, Tony. I think that's a huge call out that I hadn't even thought about. It's a great way to put it. You know, you've worked with leaders at the top levels, and you've worked with the entry level person coming out of the university that says, oh, hey, I want to start my career in professional services. For those folks that you've seen grow from a career perspective, what are some of the things you think that they did differently? And was there something from your perspective that their organizations might have done to help them get from where they were then to those really successful places that they're in today?
So I think the first thing is sharing with them the art of the possible. And again, when I think about my own experience in professional services, I think at the time when I was coming up, there were maybe 5 Black senior partners across all of the firms. And I think 2 or 3 of them were in Deloitte. Across all of the firms, you know, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it wasn't more than 10. And so there was not very many people that looked like me, right? So if I was dependent upon Lovey Jackson or some of the other senior leaders to be the person that carries all of the Black people to promote them in Deloitte, not going to happen.
Right.
That responsibility of nurturing our talent has to be everybody's responsibility. Okay? Has to be everybody's responsibility. So people that took ownership for me and really said, this is the art of the possible. You could do this. You can be a senior partner by the time you retire in this firm. Right? So that's what I would say is the first thing. We as middle level managers, all the way up to senior managers, senior level managers, we have to help people paint the art of the possible. And it goes back to also coaching them on, here's how this, you know, this organization runs. Here are the players you need to think about, how you position, and again, what's your relevance, right? That's the key. If I don't understand the rules of the game or what game is being played, I'm not going to be an MVP.
That's a great point. I see a question in the chat. One question is, I would like to know how having remote teams is impacting developing middle managers.
Yeah, it is impacting because it's very different in email. It's very different even in Zoom to really understand what the dynamics are, what's going on. And I think you have to have different ways of trying to do it. I do think it's a tough one. It's a tough one. We just have to continue to slave through it. Although what I would say is just try to get intimate. You can't be intimate with 15 people on a call. So if you're a mid-level manager and you've got 15 people on your team, then figure out, you know, at least once a month or every other week, you're going to have a focused conversation, Zoom, phone call, whatever, with that individual where you're engaging one-on-one with them. You know, that's what I would do in this situation right now. Unfortunately, I'm, you know, not, I don't have a team. I'm not working in that capacity. But I think you got to figure out other ways to get intimate with people. And that's really what it's about.
Yeah, no,
It comes back to that trust, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. You know, this is a little bit this is going to require a little bit of perspective from you, retrospective. When you think about what you know now relative to what you knew when you were early in your career, what would you share that could probably help somebody else that might be in that stage, at that early stage now?
That's a great question. And it's a hard question to answer.
That's why I threw it over to you.
I know. Thank you for that. So, I think careers take different stages, right? And, in my early career, there was no fear, to the point that my nickname was Guerrilla, like guerrilla warfare, right? Because I was ready to take on every battle.
Yeah.
Highly principled, and if you were violating those principles, I'm ready to duke it out, right? Intellectually, of course.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things that I've learned over time is to not be as binary with that, not to be so principled that, this person's wrong. Why can't they see they're wrong? But really try to look at it through their set of lenses. And I had a boss once tell me, when I was in conflict with a more senior white male engineer, you don't know if it's because you're electrical and you're a mechanical engineer and he's electrical. You don't know if it's because he's white and you're black. You don't know if it's because you're female and he's male. You don't know if it's because you're younger and he's older.
Yeah.
So it's it could be any one of those dimensions. And now what you have to figure out is how you're going to reach his heart and mind to influence him and persuade him to think the way you want him to think.
Yeah. No, that's a great.
That's probably the number one thing that I would say I try to do now, or I've tried to build my craft of observing, quietly outthinking others, hearing what's not being said, and saying, how can I convince this person otherwise?
Yeah. No, great point. What about, everyone says, hey, I want to get a mentor, or I need a sponsor, or I need something like this. What are your thoughts on what that mentor-mentee relationship, sponsoring, what are those things from your perspective? And how does that play into this whole development, Lance, a journey, really?
So they're all different, and I really apologize because he decided to start barking right now. They're really different. Mentoring, I think, is really someone who advises you. They advise you. They help you think through how you're going to address something. A coach is an advisor in some ways, but they should be more focused on helping you be the best athlete. Right? So they're taking all of your innate abilities and really trying to help you train to advance those innate abilities. It's a little bit different than advising. It's more about, what are you going to do with that skill, that talent? How are you going to advance it? So think about a football coach, right? In that capacity. And then a sponsor. A sponsor is someone who is going to bet their own political capital for your advancement. So I'm going to put Cody in Japan because I know Cody can do that job. And here's what I'm going to do to make Cody successful, right? That's how I look at the three of them. And I have all three. I just reached out to my coach this morning. That was my coach when I was at Deloitte, and said, hey, and then we haven't talked in a year, but hey, retired 3 months ago, let's talk, so that I can start to build some other muscle, right?
Yeah.
And the coaching relationship in particular is one, and maybe even so with the mentor relationship, depending on you, if you sought somebody out versus if the company created a mentor for you. Those are relationships they can come to a natural end when you feel you've gotten out of it what you need to get out of it. The sponsorship relationship, sometimes you don't even know who your sponsor is, right? But that's one where I think they're sort of more in control of the life cycle of the relationship than the other two, is the best way I would put it.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I just didn't understand the power of a coach until I started working with coaches more, and you realize that, wow, in order to get to the next level, I mean, case in point, my business partner is a digital marketing coach, and I feel like I got my own built-in coach. He's observed things that I've done, made suggestions. Now it's up to me to take the feedback, but taking that feedback, and it's been game changing on a number
Mhm.
of situations.
Yeah. Well, believe it or not, another thing I added between September and December 18th is that I went through a certification program with the International Coaching Federation. So I'm now an executive coach.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And it was because of all these years of experience, I said, hey, this is something that I still want to do, and this is a way I can continue to engage. Right. So
I'm
it's
not
fun.
surprised either, Tony. I'm not surprised because like I said in the beginning, I think you're the busiest person in America, and you're helping a lot of people. I know I've personally benefited from your guidance and your direction and your coaching over the years, and certainly when we work together. And so I'm excited to see that. And I know a lot of other people are gonna benefit from that.
Well, thanks. It's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's one of the things, and I bet you've seen this a little bit, especially with all your experience with ELC and all the leaders that you've worked with. What happens when a middle manager gets promoted to the next level?
I was just looking at that question.
Right. It's
that is a great question. And as a matter of fact, someone that I'm coaching, that is what we're coaching on. They just got promoted over their peers. And so they want to figure out how to be effective. And the first thing I would say is there a peer that's not happy because they didn't get the promotion? So if you've got one of those, you got to address it head on, because they will set the pace and the tone for anything else that happens in terms of the dynamics of the group. But it really comes back to, what's your 90-day plan look like? I'll make it very practical. I'm not going to speak in sort of philosophical jargon.
Yeah.
What's your 90-day plan look like? What is it that you want to see for this group, and how do you want them to succeed? What are the expectations of your leaders and other key stakeholders? Spend time going on a listening tour to understand all of those inputs and frame your thoughts, and engage with your team. Think about those people that have been great bosses for you and those people who have not been so great. What's made them great? What's made them not so great? How do you build that into your own, set of values? We talked about my values earlier. How do you build those into your own set of values? In the case of this individual, the first thing was the person, the role above her that would be her boss. That person, there's no person in that role. There's no person in that seat. So now she's got like two bosses ahead of her. And she's like, she's just frazzled. She was frazzled. She's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I said, well, what do you think you should do? And so then she thought about, put my action plan together and socialize. And so that's what she did. And the boss two levels ahead said, I am so glad you took the initiative to come with an action plan and your thoughts about what you're going to get done, because she was in the group. So she knew the work that needed to be done, right? She just needed the confidence in herself. And again, moving to that span of influence of, I'm going to get buy-in from him. I'm going to meet with each of my team members to get buy-in from them. I want them to give input to the plan, which is what she did. And I want them to meet with me on a regular basis. And she's had a couple of sessions with them where they do ideation sessions. So she's getting them engaged and encouraged and motivated. Whereas the prior boss who left never would even ask for their input. He would just put the plan together, and that was the plan.
Wow.
So she's already bringing them along. Hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, no, that's definitely helpful. I do want to be thoughtful about your time and the time. But one of the things that would be ideal is to have the audience that is attending today, and certainly the people who are going to watch this in the future, be able to walk away with something, some steps they could take, right? So what are some things that the audience could move forward with, and as they move forward to try to develop middle managers, or if they're a middle manager, what are a few steps that they should go out and
Yeah.
take today if they were to do that?
Yeah. Well, the first one I think is, if you subscribe to this, being a servant leader, I think is, something that has been very effective for me. So I would spend time understanding what it means to be a servant leader. And how do I take that and personalize it for myself? So, what kind of, values do I want to exhibit? How do I want to be the role model for others? How do I want to engage with that team? How do I want to motivate someone who might be demotivated? How do I stay focused, laser focused on performance and outcomes and impact?
Yeah.
I ask that question often. What impact am I making? What are the outcomes we're trying to achieve? How do I know we've gotten there? Right?
Yeah.
And make sure that you rehearse and practice the language of your leaders so that you're engaged with where they're headed. But that would be my words of advice. And the other thing is, like I said, for me, I have a set of core values or simple truth, and that's community. So your group, who's your community? That's competency. We talked about that earlier in terms of staying ahead in your technical craft. Your character, as they say, what do others think about you when you're not in the room? And your courage. And so, as I said, for me, it's not been rosy all the time. I'm not going to sit here and try to paint that picture like it's been, all bonbons and fluffy puppy dogs and roses, But when I have had those difficult times, I still come back to, who am I? What do I stand for? And for me, when I had an inflection point in my career, I realized title didn't mean anything. I was doing the work I wanted to do, right?
Yeah.
So you have to ask yourself those questions. Courage is, having the ability to take a stance, take a position, and have that conversation, that difficult conversation. How will you align your core values with the mission of the organization? Excuse my language. I thought I lost you.
Oh. Hey, I've lost the screen a few times.
I know. And so, think about your core values, because they'll take you.
Yeah.
If you keep those as your North Star, they'll take you wherever you need to go.
That's a great point. I do want to see if we have any questions in the chat or in the Q&A.
So we answered the questions about middle managers after they experience a setback or failure. I think, well, I guess we didn't answer that question, but what I would say with that is, they're going to be emotional. So when they're emotional, you need to be empathetic. You need to allow them to be emotional. But at some point, you need to come back to, now let's sit down and dissect this. What was the feedback given? Are you satisfied? Are you clear about that feedback? Go back and get other feedback, right? Where do you think you're culpable in this situation? What could you have done differently knowing what you know now? So it's really helping them to accept that they can't change other people, first of all. Maybe accept the circumstances, but really, how are they lessons to move forward? They're not failures, they're lessons to move forward, and creating that framework and mindset.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Tonie, this has been amazing. I want to check if we have any other questions in the chat box or in the Q&A. I'm looking, I don't see any.
I don't see any either.
I think we've gotten all the questions. So if you've got a question, and you feel free to put it in the chat box. And if we don't get to it, because we're about to wrap up, we'll make sure that we reach out to Tonie and get it get it answered. Tonie, any last thoughts or parting thoughts that you want to share with with our audience?
Other than my dog giving you advice,
I love it.
I would say just enjoy life. And, I think if nothing else, COVID has taught us how precious life is. And if you're in a situation or a circumstance and your gut says it's not right, don't keep trying to, work through that. If you keep coming back to the same answer, you have to think about how you fulfill yourself ultimately. And that might mean doing some brave things. Map out your plan around that. Figure out where your risks are when you decide to take that leap. But what I would say is life is too short not to have a good time.
That's all. I think that's some great advice. Tonie, I really want to thank you for joining us. You've been amazing. This is fantastic information. I know you're super busy, and it's been an honor just to have you join us. And
oh, it's an honor to be here. I'm never too busy for you, Cody Horton.
I love it.
All right.
I love it. Well, super. Hey, thanks a lot.
All right. See ya.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.